Good afternoon, family, and welcome to Critical Sense Making Sessions, facilitated by yours truly, Revolutionary Rika. Today is episode 4, and our focus will be on education, hip hop dance, youth mentorship, and almost anything in between. Today's guest is Sergio Suarez, aka Power Serge, and he is on the hip hop dance scene. And he is a powerful advocate for hip hop dance, social justice, and education. He is also my brother as we journey through our doctoral program together. Serge, tell us a little more about yourself.
Man, well, thank you for that introduction, and thank you for holding this space and for creating this avenue for folks to just kind of tune in and allowing folks to share their voice, especially in a time like today. So thank you for that. So yes, grew up in South Hayward. I think that my story is definitely unique, but not different than anyone else's in regards to just kind of how I grew up. Strenuous funds, education, kind of the idea with being pushed out, and growing up in the '80s and '90s, like there was always just that. Hip hop was just always kind of around, right? But the thing is that like even today, it's like you have to kind of listen, right? And what I mean by that is like some songs will speak to you, and other ones are kind of a lot of hip hop has been commodified and mediatized, and so there's like this other avenue of hip hop, and so yeah, I started listening, man, early '90s, and then from there it was kind of like I got pulled out of my own world and into this other world, right? That was based on awakening and knowledge and healing, and so yeah, that's the hip hop that I've grown up with. Since then, what else have I done? A lot of my work, recognizing that hip hop is this tool and this avenue. I witness what it's done for myself. I also recognize, well, man, if it's done this for me, well, shoot, it could do this for others, and that's kind of where the work begins, right? And so back in like 2004, started doing a lot of after school programs, reaching out. I had, man, I had like 10, 15 high schools on lock from like South Hayward up to Oakland, like just, every day after school program, teaching kids how to dance. But that was like kind of like that radical change, that radical healing that our communities needed. That unfortunately, because of budget cuts, our programs a lot of times get cut. So there's a accessibility issue there, but even more so within our own Black and Brown communities, right? Like that's, and so hip hop allowed that to happen, and from there, recognizing that, man, I need to not only be teaching our kids, this idea of hip hop, or more so these movements. I also needed to kind of like critically change myself, and so from there, back to school. Shoot, still in school now. So yeah, that's kind of the story. Uh, Making a way out of no way,
Yes, yes.
and so
Well, thank you. And so I heard you say helping others or showing others through hip hop, right? Um, just these other avenues that they have sometimes when schools are hostile toward them. I found this clip. um,
yeah,
that I found this clip on YouTube that I want to share.
yeah.
Would love for just to get your comments about it. And what were your thoughts when you all did it, and how young people can get engaged.
Yeah.
It kicked me out, so I'm gonna stop sharing. But you get the gist. And I watched it a couple times, and so
Yeah.
what it reminded me of, but I definitely want to get your thoughts, is just this idea of when we were younger and kids were gonna fight. You get in a circle and you're trying to cheer
Mhm.
them on. They really don't want to fight, right? But you got
Right.
like 10 minutes of this coaching them to fight.
Yeah.
But it reminded me of Michael Jackson's video Bad. And
Mm.
so and of course like Break In, and what was the other big one from the from
Yeah. B Street.
Beach Street? Yeah, like when they were doing this competition where it took away. kids thrive off competition. We know that, right? Especially working in after school and out of school time, and even in schools. But this is like this healthy. I see it as a healthy competition and a way for them to own their skills.
Yeah. Yeah. So, man, those are the students right there. I mean, that is a mixture of students from, like I said, South Hayward up to Oakland. And that specific center is where I would, as a youngster, go and practice. You
Mhm.
know, so that center is Weeks Park off of Patrick. And so that place I've personally been frequently or visiting since, man, I would say 92, 93.
Mhm.
And so we had that center on lock for over a decade. You know, every Friday evening, from like 5 to 9, like it was just our center. You
Mhm.
know, so we would invite the local youth. You know, a lot of them would take BART. They would find rides. And so, one day I come in and it's like, yeah, it's my birthday. And so all the students, all the mentees, all the Padawans are there and they're like, yo, we're going to do this, right? And so there's this celebratory idea that it's this call out and we do quote unquote birthday rounds, right? So however old you are is how many rounds you're gonna drop. But so yeah, so that there was a very special day. But yeah, the idea of it, kind of how like you posed it was like when I first started, uh, again, 93, 94. Like when I would step outside, a lot of times I would, I don't know, I'd have to kind of square up, right? Like just be on defense or offense sometimes, like mainly because like, man, I'm not trying to get jumped today.
Right.
Or, I'm not trying to get jacked for my shoes or my backpack or, so it was just like, and it was like every day, right? Like you just wouldn't walk to school. You'd have to walk with like eyes behind the back of your head, just because you just never knew. You never knew what was going to go down. You just kind of had to be ready. You had to, in some ways, just be alert,
Yeah.
And so that just being an alert 24/7, 7 days a week, it is a form of trauma. It is a form. You can't just be living life in anxiety.
Yes.
And so when I got, like I said, when I started listening to hip hop, especially when I got into breaking, I had a cousin who was a DJ, and he popped in Beat Street, and I was like, "Yo, what?" It was just mind blowing.
Yeah.
And so once I started like to dabble with it, it really it took that energy I already had pent up into these movements, right? And so what ended up happening was that like my focus switched on, rather than hanging out with the homies, I just kind of like work on these moves, right? And within this early 90s, like there just wasn't too many people still breaking, like people are like, yo man, that's old school, like what is he doing, and so I in some ways would get laughed at, or but it like, I don't know, it just kind of gave me an avenue regardless. And so from there I found other folks within Hayward, maybe one dancer at this high school, another one at that middle school, and so we would all kind of conjugate over at Weeks Park, over at that center, and that was kind of in a lot of ways our sanctuary,
Mhm.
and from there got gained up a lot from some of the elders, you know, uh, in regards to like, yo, hip hop, you just don't bite. That's like the number one rule. You don't, and so in the idea of like identity and individualism is like front and center,
Mhm.
right? And so in high school, I remember it. A friend of mine was like, "Man, Serge, you got a lot of power, Serge." Then like I did a lot of spin moves,
Mhm.
and I was like, "What? What'd you say?" He was like, "You got a lot of power, Serge." And I was like, "Yo, that's fresh," And that's how the name came about, the
Okay.
idea of Power Surge. But that became kind of like my suit of armor. I was no longer just Sergio, or I became this idea, like kind of like the inner me, the true me in some ways, where I could take those anxieties and those frustrations and take it out on the floor,
Yeah.
and then a lot of the music we listen to is funk and soul. A lot of those breaks, when you have James Brown telling you to, everybody over here get involved, everybody over there get into it. Like that spoke to me. Not only did it speak to me because I'm listening to the beats, but in regards to fulfilling or healing what was out, what I was missing inside, like it just spoke to me. So a lot of our tutelage, a lot of our programming is on this idea. And, for a lot of our youth, especially our youth of color, some gravitate towards it. Others, it's just really challenging,
Yeah.
right? Because a lot of them see it like, well, I don't have that kind of strength. And a lot of times you don't even need that strength. At the end of the day, this dance was all on top. Everything on the floor is ultimately just the icing on the cake, but at the end of the day, it's about movement. It's about expression. And so yeah, that video kind of like culminates that work.
Okay, awesome. I'm glad I found that one then.
Yeah.
So to frame this first part of our conversation, I have a few questions I want to ask, and then I'll have you share out.
Hmm.
So just we want you to tell us what it was like growing up in South Hayward, and then did you have any mentors? What role did they play with keeping you on the right track? What extracurricular activities did you participate in to keep you from joining those gangs that were forming in South Hayward?
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, in that sense, it was man, I didn't know what I didn't know, right? And some of the folks that I looked up to, some of the OGs or the elders, were in gangs. A lot of them, and this was like even family.
Mhm.
And then there was like this other aspect as well. Is like, my family was were from Nicaragua, and so everyone in the community was from like Mexico, and so like there was just that little thing too. Like my Spanish wasn't like quite Mexican Spanish. Like we had a different kind of lisp, we different kind of slangs, and so there was that as well. And because of that, I felt like I almost had to like be a little bit tougher.
Mhm.
I had to just kind of be a little bit more. And there was a saying that would go around like, somos pocos pero locos, meaning that we're few but we're crazy, right? Like, it's so, there was just that idea. And so, yeah, a lot of the elders, I didn't know, what they were doing was necessarily bad. Like, a lot of them, I just didn't know. I didn't know that, like, slanging, you know, uh, I just didn't know. I just saw it as like the norm, because I didn't necessarily have anyone else tell me, like, well, there's this way,
Yeah.
right? And so, I give them props though, because they schooled me on the streets. They in some ways schooled me on the idea of a gang. Sometimes we tend to uh, penalize it or criminalize it, but at the end of the day, I mean, there's a lot of good values in it as well. I mean, for a lot of young men who are looking for attention and for mentorship,
Yes.
sometimes gangs provide that, and so um, it's just that, because of financial circumstances, they get into different things. And so second grade, I actually got jumped into a gang, and I remember we were like, quote unquote, the peewees, you know, and it was all fun. At the time, it just did, like I said, it didn't seem bad. It didn't seem any of those things. And so, but again, now in retrospect, when I look back and I think of all those old homies, I mean, some of them are doing life, aren't around anymore. And I attribute uh, I attribute ultimately hip hop, kind of taking me out, not necessarily out of that world, but like my focus just went like shoo,
Mm.
and in a very crucial time too, like middle school, because I remember even in middle school, it was like, man, who's gonna be the alpha male today? Who's gonna be
Right.
the, you just look at someone sideways and it's already like a trigger,
Right.
and so yeah, it caught me at a really good time. And so, yeah, man,
I
yeah,
definitely feel you on that trauma. The part about a lot of times gangs get a bad rap because of what they end up having to do to make survive, right?
right,
But it is that family for a lot of our, not just our young black boys, black and brown boys, but for the girls as well.
yeah,
Sometimes they're not getting love at home, so they're looking for that extended family. Sometimes I don't come from a big family, or maybe my family doesn't live in California or near me. And so you do click up with people who may be going through similar challenges or you guys may have some commonalities. It may just be that you're the outcast, and so we're all going to hang out together. And so I always share out that I've been in school all my life, but the hood and the church raised me.
Yeah.
So I got this armor on, but it's like the armor of God. But then it also, if I need to pull the,
Mhm.
the shank out to,
Yeah.
whatever it is, but it's like those survival skills you learn. But then
Yep.
as you get exposed to new things and your attention turns to this new world or this new exposure, it's not that you forgot, but like the world is so much larger than what you thought
Yeah.
it was in that little bubble you were in.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You're absolutely right. And you said it, it is a survival skill, 100%. Like growing up, I always remember seeing like Cal State Hayward, Warren Hall up on that hill. Like I would literally, walk out of my house and there was perched on the hill, And so I remember just ultimately thinking like, man, that ain't for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll never see it. And shoot, here we are today, second year doctoral
Got
student.
to
Like,
it. That's right. And so our second part of our conversation, I want to turn our attention and ask you some questions relevant to today. And so, in your opinion, what is the most prominent educational challenge that Black and Brown students face? How do you suppose educators can acknowledge, address, and solve this issue? And why is mentoring vital for Black and Brown students? And what are you currently doing to impact Black and Brown students?
yeah, yeah, that's yeah. It's a heavy question. There's a lot of layers to that, and so I'll do my best to scratch, as best that as I can. But I think what it ultimately comes down to is in one of our professors, Dr. G, kind of like for me, kind of clarified it. Is that it's in some ways the matrix, right? And it's like we're plugged into this idea and these perceptions of one way, right? And a lot of times we don't even identify it just because we're taught this one way from kindergarten, right? And it gets compounded year after year. So when we get kicked out of high school, it's kind of like, why do I got to learn that? How is this going to help me? Why do I got to learn it this way? And so it's that assimilation, right? We're trying to assimilate to these systems, and so a lot of times, for folks of color, it's like we just don't assimilate. Some do, and when we do, what do we lose by assimilating towards it,
Right.
right? And so I've always kind of wondered, like, man, what would it be like for an education system to consider me, not just me as Sergio, but like the whole me, right? And I was listening to a podcast with Dr. Christopher Emden, and he was talking about the idea that like, um, what if like, so he put it like this. He was like, as a kid, what drew me in was, those Biggie songs, right? And the reason why was because the lyrics spoke to me. It was like I would rap them because it was a reminder of like my own circumstances, my own community. And he was just like, whoa, what if like a syllabus, you know, s- uh, uh, what if a syllabus, your class syllabus, may give you that same impact, right? When
Mm-hmm.
you read a syllabus, you're like, whoa, okay, this is speaking to me, like the whole me,
Yeah.
and so I think that is kind of like, I think today, currently, with the social unrest and everything that's going on, there's a real opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
It's like band-aids and everything's just coming off. Gloves are coming off right now. If we're gonna like get this correct, it's like that complacency and being silenced. Like, I think that right now is the time to act. And part of that work, it really takes all of us, and I've been in scenarios even at my own college, my own department, where these conversations, our students are speaking up.
Yeah.
They're saying, hey, this ain't right, and ultimately we have to, be allies and um, in some ways protect their voices, make sure that like, hey, this is an amazing opportunity for them to begin practicing their voice and calling this out, or more so calling it in, right? And so that's kind of what I see right now, happening. And I want to make sure that like our students make that the norm moving forward, because a lot of times when I was in college, community college, undergrad, I would just be like, okay, I don't know the answer, I'm not going to challenge, right? I'm not going to challenge the teacher because there is a student teacher dynamic or power dynamic that like he must or she must be right.
That banking model, right? We're receptacles, and they're going to give us all the information. Not that we bring any experience or information on our own to the classrooms, but that they are the keepers of the knowledge, and we just need to receive, right?
That's it. Yeah, 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 yeah. And so and you know, I was kind of groomed to never even question,
Mm-hmm.
challenge it, you know. And so I just they give me the you know they'll give me the homework. I try to pass it as best that I can, and you know I get the grade, and then on to the next and on to the next. But you know there's certain ideas within those assignments that like man I should have challenged, you know, but like I just you know I wasn't necessarily armored up. I didn't know, you know, I don't know what I
Have the
know. So,
language. You didn't have you
right,
weren't equipped with the skills to understand that that was happening. I think I was sharing with someone last week that wow, it took me like 4 or 5 degrees to finally start to get the language and the necessary skills to start trying to one have conversations, but then also make real impact around social justice issues.
yeah.
But look how much money you need to spend before you do that. Why couldn't
Mhm.
the culture of power be actually explicitly taught in schools?
100, 100. And I say that now, you know, there's been nights where I'm like, man, why did it take this long?
Mhm.
You know, why did it take, you know, for me to get to this doctoral level and this work for me to just feel like, yo, I'm going to flex this voice,
Yes.
you know, I'm going to say something and I have every means and right to do so. You know, I'm going to challenge, you know, and man, and so, yeah, those are some of the things where I'm like, okay, you know, for the youngsters that I work with now, you know, especially within dance, I need to prepare them, especially for my dancers of color, that hey, you know what, that entertainment world is there's still this thing called typecasting, and it will still, you know, it's still happening there. And how do I prepare you for it? I can't just necessarily prepare you for these moves, but I have to prepare you for that world as well. And so, as the educators, it doesn't necessarily have to be just dance. It can literally be engineers and the tech or medicine. Yo, there is still an issue in this industry, you know. And how do we not only give our students of color like the tools, but also the game them up on, yo, here's what it looks like. You know, once you get shot out, it's still going to be hard for you to get a job because potentially your last name, your complexion, you know, skin color, you know, there's so many gender, you know, there's so many things that like uh, educators are currently, I don't know, we're kind of missing, right? Like we're not, we're kind of teaching for this world, but we're not teaching for their world.
Right, right. What was our hashtag? Lace them up. Was that from Dr. G? Lace them
Yeah,
up.
lace them up.
Yeah, that's what we have to do. Thanks, Serge, for sharing out about that. Um, so, what are you currently doing to impact Black and Brown students?
Yeah, 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 yeah. So the work has always kind of been, again, since 2004, these after school programs. And even then, you know, I've always now, what I'm realizing is that mentorship doesn't just end at, you know, once junior high is over, high school's over, college. It's well into your 20s, 30s, 40s, you know, and it is a lifelong commitment, you know.
Yes.
And so, and even myself, I'm always looking for that mentorship. You know, I'm always kind of looking for folks who are doing certain things, or I have my OGs in the hood, you know, but they can only serve a certain aspect of me, right? That we're so
Right.
dynamic. There's so many different layers. I have so many interests, and so I try to find a diverse group of men that I can just be like, all right, you know, here's my mentor for relationships. Here's my mentor for education. Here's my femtor for emotion. You know, like
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, you know, so I try to diversify. And sometimes mentor doesn't necessarily mean that they're older than you. You know,
Exactly.
sometimes they can be your old students, and so I also make sure to call that out as well. That you know, I have literally old students or mentees where I'm like, nah, you're my mentee now. Like I come to you because I know uh, there's a certain aspect of me that you're helping me um, address. And so yeah, you know, so that work is continuous, you know. And I would say that that is my most in regards to the quote unquote hard work. That is it right there, you know. I mean, that clip that you showed earlier, I mean, man, the list is in, if not in the hundreds, close to the thousands, in regards to young men, and the young women I'm working with. And so, in some ways, we've built kind of like an army here in the Bay Area, a coalition where, um, there's still a lot of things we need to work on, but for the most part, I'm super proud of it and thankful to have these individuals in my life and my family's life. So,
Awesome. That's awesome. So the third kind of area I want to talk about is really about looking toward the future. And so if you had the opportunity to redesign education, what would that entail?
mm,
And then how can hip hop dance engage Black and Brown students who are struggling to maintain their academics? And then lastly, how can more adults get involved with mentoring youth?
yeah, 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 yeah. I think that hip hop in general, it's such an amazing tool. Not and yes, the dance aspect is one portion of hip hop, but there's also the MCing, the writing, the DJing, the beatboxing, and then just the knowledge. There's so many stories that won't be shared in our textbooks, and there's this idea of each one teach one.
Mhm.
And uh, and so some of the stories that I've heard, like they'll just never be, unfortunately, in textbooks. And so I believe that hip hop is, I mean, there's no child today here in America that has not grown up with hip hop, that has not, embraced it, experienced it, or it potentially in their, on their playlist on their iPad or iPods or whatever. And so, because hip hop is so ingrained into our culture, in some ways, we also have to recognize that, it's a more commodified version of hip hop, and there is this other hip hop culture that is like, true to these struggles, which is because hip hop is, it is it is birthed in the African American diaspora 100%. And, and if we start recognizing what that pain looks like, recognizing that, hey, man, there's 400 years of like, of slavery, and then there's, the Jim Crow era, and then, and then out of all that pain and anguish, you get something like hip hop.
Beautiful, yeah.
You get something that like, this community had to be resourceful because there was no, they made a way out of no way, and so what a beautiful art form. And not to say that, and here's the other part about hip hop is that like, Grandmaster Caz said it perfectly. He goes, hip hop didn't invent anything, reinvented everything, right? And so, what he meant to say was that like all these MCing and breaking, all this was already happening, right? People put a date like, oh, it started in '73, but hip hop actually extends way back, you
Mm.
know, before African Americans were even on this land, like it extends that far back. Now, the idea of MCing, speaking in code, you kind of had to, but so it's like if you start, really digging into hip hop in that sense, you're already getting ethnic studies, you're getting African American studies, you're getting Native American studies, and so to me,
Literacy because of the language aspect, the African American vernacular English, right?
yeah, 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 yeah. And so, I think that, not to say that I mean, it'd be cool, for one day there to be some kind of degree on hip hop studies, or like an AA or a BA. But it has to, hip hop is ethnic studies, it is social justice, it is all those things. And so, I feel, why not utilize hip hop into our programs, into, our departments, highlight it a little bit more. Hey, we're gonna uh, extend, in these ethnic studies departments. We're also gonna have a hip hop studies, course, mainly because it's already that this is what our youth are consuming. It is, the power of it's global. And so, yeah, in regards to education, how it would look like, that's one of my hopes, is that, implementing more of a, not the commercialized hip hop, but more the cultural, ideas and values of hip hop into education, or implementing into education. So,
So you want, so am I hearing you saying you want it to be integrated into our core subjects, integrating hip hop so that they could use that to our core subjects so kids will you can engage kids better.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, speak their language. Why do I need to uh, prepare them for a world that doesn't exist? Why don't we prepare them for their own worlds? And in hip hop, because hip hop is like you said earlier, it's a vernacular, it's a way of dress, it's a way of
Right.
thinking. It's not just because I'm a breakdancer that makes me know. It is like it encapsulates so much,
It's
and
a
so
culture. Yeah.
yeah, it is a culture, and identifying what that culture is and how it's been marginalized and oppressed, and so that in itself is a form of tutelage, and implementing some of that. It doesn't, it is through the ideas of hip hop, but at the end of the day, it is culture, and
And
implementing
how,
that.
I would say too how it's been appropriate, can't say appropriated. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
It's just been taken, and
right,
so you get those different ones. And so I do gravitate toward more underground music
right.
where people's voices are not. This is not. I'm not trying to sell a record. This is my story. This is my journey. This is what has happened to me.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, shoot, like, uh, in regards to just kind of growing up and going through college, I mean, if it wasn't for b-boying, man, I wouldn't have been able to support myself. Literally this art form that I learned on the street from my elders, from my OGs, like, hey kid, let me show you something. Traveling to New York every couple summers just to find, hear the stories, just to kind of like, hey, who invented this idea or this move, or that was just each one teach one. I didn't pay anything to learn any of this, but yet it was such an amazing skill that took me across the globe, that allowed me to impact all these youth, that like I've been able to do workshops again at amazing universities, perform on these big stages, like, and it allowed me to get my education.
Yes.
And I didn't, in some ways, maybe I didn't get a doctorate uh, early, but I did get a doctorate in hip hop.
Right.
And so all those times that I had teachers telling me like, "Hey, Serge, I need you to pay attention. Stop goofing off." Well, how would I know that what you're teaching me is gonna like pay off?
Mhm.
Like me doing this right here actually paid off for me. Like it is in some ways took me across the globe, and uh, some of the experiences and opportunities that I've had, I wouldn't have had if I would have stayed on that track.
Yeah.
This track right here helped me to realize these dreams, and so yeah, that's kind of like the beauty and power of hip hop.
That's awesome. And so this last kind of final section of questions, I really want you to share out anything you're doing to help others or advocate for. Have you taken any action to advocate for mentors in hip hop dance and for mentors and hip hop dance in schools or any other issues that Black and Brown communities face? And have you created any resources that counteract oppression?
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's a big one. So currently, at this moment, like I kind of see like my me pursuing this degree as a form of advocacy. I'm like, no, this is uh, so a lot of my focus has been on just the schoolwork, right? Just so in some ways, I've kind of taken a step back, mainly because like this is my advocacy, and one of the reasons is because I know that it's unfortunate, but like this sheet of paper is just gonna I can bark, but it's gonna allow a bigger bite. It's gonna allow me to bite a little bit more, and it's just unfortunate that that's because of the system that we're in. These degrees for some reason, like they just speak, and so my focus has been on the degree, and so I've taken myself a little bit. uh, I'm still super involved within the dance community. In fact, in October we're going to have a hip hop dance conference slash social justice conference, which Dr. G will be there speaking. uh,
Cool.
yeah, 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 and yeah, yeah, yeah. And so dates will come out soon. But recognizing that even within the hip hop like dance world, that's also has been commodified. It's been taught in a way that's more Eurocentric,
Mhm.
meaning that all right, folks, we're gonna get in lines and we're gonna do 5, 6, 7, 8, right? And that's just not how I learned it, right? We would just toss out moves and go off the grooves, and you know. And so hip hop in some ways whenever was never really intended for the stage. It was always meant to kind of be those park jams and that party, and like, yo, if you bust out, then that's what it is. But now there's this whole new world where breaking will be in the Olympics in 2024 in France.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so there's this whole new like industry
Mhm.
that is in some ways not even, they'll say hip hop, but they don't even revert back to the South Bronx and the struggle. They don't even touch on that. They're like race isn't even discussed, right? And so there's a big reckoning right now within the scene that it's like, yo, we really need to address these issues.
Yeah.
Um, Also, and then there's like the other parts of hip hop that kind of get uh, don't get addressed as well. There's a lot of misogyny in there. There's a lot of like, it's so that there's reckoning there as well, and I'm excited that folks are stepping not only up but in regards to just calling it out and in, and so it's it's a difficult moment, I think in any world right now or in any community, but specifically in the hip hop dance community, it is shifting.
Mhm.
As much as we need to be showcasing our dance move, we also need to be also addressing our communities, especially the African American community. Like, yo, this is not. We can't be participating in these movements that was birthed in the African American community and not uplift it, not help provide a voice for this community.
What's
You
being it seems like it's being invisibilized, right? That
Oh yeah,
struggle of it, because now we have this art form that is world not like worldwide.
right.
Everybody's doing hip hop. Wherever you go, it's so many like different, what would you call, I wouldn't, subgenres of hip hop.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So I think promoting like conversations around that struggle of how what it evolved from, I
right.
definitely think is crucial right now
Oh
on
yeah.
stage.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Because I mean, big companies are getting involved. There's like sponsorships, all your monsters and Red Bulls, like everyone's involved, and
Neoliberalism, right? Any business that looks like they can make a buck off, they're going to put money into it, and they're going to have people sell their souls to perform or whatever, and then capitalize off of it. And the people that are actually producing the music or the
right,
whatever the beats or whatever it is, they're being exploited.
right, right,
Yeah,
right.
right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, part of like the not necessarily the fear, but where it's headed is that like, at what point so I 100% feel like, yeah, this art form was for me. It was intended for me. It helped me in so many different ways, right? Like I would my parents would never have had the ability to pay for these classes. That's just, straight. And I don't feel like other kids need to pay for this art form either.
Right.
And at what point, will this be this art form, if it continues down this path, at what point would it be for the haves and the have nots, right? Because it was called a street dance for a reason, because it wasn't, this higher, society, this Eurocentric society was like, nah, we don't, that ain't ballet. We'll keep it in the streets. It doesn't deserve a space in these studios or in these dance programs, and it's still treated as such,
Mhm. So
right?
gigging, I'm curious, was gigging like the new age version of breakdancing when gigging was out like 10 or 12 years ago, whenever that was?
Yeah, I think there's always new movement. There's always new dances coming along, and that's the beauty is that is always it. These movements are always dictated by the youth.
Yeah.
Like it's ever evolving, and that's again the core value of hip hop is that you just don't bite, and so things just things will change. New styles and new movements will come in place, and that's kind of what keeps hip hop fresh. you
Mhm.
know uh and then for a lot of us OGs, like, we just get stuck on, nah, this is what I remember, this is what I'm going to hold on to, and y'all can't, y'all need to recognize this. But the idea, it is continuously evolving, so and that's and ultimately that's who holds hip hop. It's the youth.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm almost 40. Like, I can't be like, so I recognize my own place in hip hop, and that I can no longer hold on to it. My days have passed. I'm just here to just celebrate and enjoy it and uh, create opportunities for those that are just continuously moving this forward. So,
Oh, thanks, Serge. So I just want to share out a couple of pearls that I pulled up from our conversation that I heard you say, and I feel like are some strong recommendations um, from you. And so educators should consider the whole child, and specifically Black and Brown students, when educating and engaging with them, not just giving information, but considering the whole child with everything that they bring into the classroom.
yeah.
Secondly, I heard encourage students, advocate, and ally for student voice. Um, Also, I heard mentorship, lifelong journey. So people who do not have mentors and are feeling stagnant, you got
Mm,
to seek out mentors. I heard someone say your circle is the sum of what is it, the I can't remember the exact quote, but it was about, you want to have people that are above you. Maybe
yeah.
there's one person below you that you're mentoring, but that you're always trying to move up and not just stay in this stagnant place. And then the last thing, hip hop as an avenue for youth voice. And
Mm,
so really promoting hip hop in education, because all of our young people, even outside of our Black and Brown students, they are engaged with hip hop. And so using that as a strategy to educate and equip young people.
yep. That's it.
Cool. So I want to thank you for being on the show and sharing your experiences and your expertise. And if you have any final thoughts or one last tip you want to give the audience, your voice is the last one that they will hear.
Oh man, no pressure, no pressure. Yeah, I ultimately, I recognize that there is a lot happening. There is a lot of civil unrest. There is a pandemic. There is, but there's no way in heck that we can make this. We can never go back to how it was. That is, if it, and I know that change is very difficult, and it is. It's a lot of uncertain times, but we have to believe and recognize that we will breathe and we will get through this, and that only happens with in unity. It's kind of like Dr. G would say, yeah, we can be in community, but in unity of what, right? And voice empowers and recognize that it is time to rethink how we come into community and how we and so I think that we need to work on uplifting each other, also think critically of our own, what we've inherited and what we've have some ways creative in regards to like our own way of thinking. How can we unpack that critically in a sense that like will just again make us grow, so as much as it's at me, hey, how are you doing, I need that as well, and I also need to make sure that I'm just checking myself 24/7, like whoa, 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 where's that coming from, why do I feel that way, and so this is like I said earlier, it's kind of like that time of reckoning, and I do see, um, you know, um, I'm hoping, and I know we will come out of this just stronger, but also realizing that, hey, man, that change and that like critical unpacking of oneself, that's just the lifelong journey, like it is yeah, a lifelong journey, and I'm in it to win it. So, um, yeah, I'll leave folks with that.
Thank you.